happening now.
Okay, should I take it away?
Yeah, welcome, Woki, for this incredible session that we will have for the Web3 plus AI Unconference. We are very glad you're here joining us this time. So the floor is yours. Introduce yourself and present your topic.
Okay, thanks so much. Really glad to be here. Hey, everyone. I am Kevin Owaki, and I think that I'm mostly known as the founder of Gitcoin. If you wouldn't mind enabling screen sharing for me, easy, that'd be great. Bitcoin is a DAO that its mission is to fund, build, and to protect what matters. And so far, it has done $50 million worth of funding for digital public goods using Allo, the new new allocation protocol that was just released. So Gitcoin's had a long and winding history from 2017 to today, but it's now a DAO, and you can check it out at gitcoin.co. And especially check out the impact report at impact.gitcoin.co, where you can see the $50 million worth of funding towards public goods that has been done. So that is, I guess, my history in this space. I disaffiliated from Gitcoin about a year ago in order to make room for other leaders in the DAO to have an impact. And I've been working on something called GreenPilled.network, which is what I'm going to be telling you about today, and is going to be the subject of my talk. GreenPilled.network is a channel for greater combinations of strength and intelligence to come together and build a more green-pilled Web3. So basically, I think that our mission is to turn degens into regens, one green pill at a time. We're building a CoordiNation across nations and cultures, which is I would define as a network society that exports regenerative digital infrastructure to the world. We've got 24 chapters in different parts of the world, which you can check out at the network's website, greenpilled.network. And you can also download the Green Pill book, which is a book that I wrote about 18 months ago, which is all about how we could use crypto in order to build positive sum games for the world. And then you can also download the Impact DAO book, which is the book about the projects that are actually making it happen. I also am the host of a podcast called Green Pill about regenerative crypto economics that dives deeper into the frontier and features people who have done the work in the Regen Web3 ecosystem. And I think that that's a great resource for people as well. Another thing that we're working on is creating local regen guides, which are basically recipe books focused on teaching engaging new ways you can regenerate your local community. And basically what I'm really hoping to do is that we've got 24 chapters all across the world, thousands of regens who are interested in doing regenerative crypto projects with each other. And what I'm really hoping is that they teach each other how to host a meetup, Regens Unite style or Green Pill style, how to run a quadratic funding round in your local community, how to do regenerative agriculture in your local community, how to teach people to use crypto in your local community. So that is the greenpill.network. There's a bunch of resources where you can participate and explore at greenpill.network. So I would encourage the listeners to check that out. And my primary talk today is going to be about greenpill.network, talking about what I see in the Regen Web3 ecosystem, why I've been focused on investing into this brand of Greenpill and building greenpill.network, and how you can get involved. So basically, I think I'd like to always start with why. Why are we here? So I see that crypto has one of the greatest potentials of any technology that I've seen out there in order to build a more solar punk world, a world in which we are regenerating our earth and our spirits and our intellects alongside of our financial system. We can now program our values into our money. And so if we wanted to build a more regenerative society, then we could do that with crypto. But the problem is that crypto now is plagued by a lot of rugs and Ponzi schemes and sometimes just outright frauds. And so there's a huge disconnect in what I think crypto's impact on the world is now and what it could be if we are successful in building a more regenerative crypto economic industry as opposed to a degenerative crypto economic industry. So how do we pull ourselves into the more plausible, adjacent, more regen future? As time goes on, if our projected path is on a more degenerative route, how do we move over to the plausible, regenerative, adjacent possible is kind of what we've been focused on at the GreenPilled network and in a lot of my content on the podcast. And I think that it kind of boils down to this question of how do we rotate capital, attention, other resources to regenerative Web3 projects? So basically projects where the resource availability of the system is going up over time. It is anti-fragile to shock events. And when I talk about resource capacity going up and regenerating over time, as opposed to degenerating over time, when I talk about that, I'm talking not just about financial capital, but I'm talking about intellectual capital and spiritual capital and material capital and cultural capital. So how do we regenerate the world with crypto, and how do we allocate resources to those regenerative Web3 projects? I'd say is sort of like the crux of the question that we just keep on asking. So I've actually done a whole extra separate talk on why we would want to do this, and I think how this ecosystem is coming to fruition. And you can check it out at the ReFi Summit. If you just Google ReFi Summit Kevin Nowaki, you can see a whole half hour on that. But basically, TLDR, I'm really happy to say that I do think that it's happening. So pluralistic public goods funding is happening. So public goods are the kind of things that don't really have a business model, but they're the things that we rely on, things like open source software and climate research and decentralized science and in pluralistic public goods funding in the Ethereum ecosystem is happening, I'm happy to say, due to the development of several funding mechanisms for public goods that have started to gain legs out there, and then distribution mechanisms that are distributing capital to the people who are supporting public goods in the Web3 ecosystem. And this is what I think it looks like. So here's an example of the Ethereum ecosystem and how Optimism is pulling in $20 million every 6 months and distributing it via retroactive public goods funding. DAO doing much less volume, but is a promising retroactive public goods funding experiment in itself. CLR Fund and Gitcoin are doing quadratic funding for the Web3 ecosystem, which is basically an interesting crowdfunding mechanism that helps people support the projects that they think are the most valuable public goods. Giveth, of course, is a crowd favorite and is doing some really great work in the space. And then Protocol Guild is out there supporting the ecosystem's public goods itself with a mechanism I would describe as a self-curated registry. So when it comes to the problem of allocating resources to regenerative projects as opposed to degenerative projects, I think that these are some of the primary aqueducts, which is like carriers of liquidity and funding, that are actually making it happen in the Ethereum ecosystem. And as a result, we're starting to see the blossoming of hundreds of impact DAOs, which I would define as Web3 projects that are oriented around having a positive impact on the world. So this graphic right here is a graphic that we produced that is oriented around helping people find in cartography the different impact DAOs that are out there. So there's regenerative economy impact DAOs, there's refi impact DAOs that are working on climate research, there's DeSci, there's education, and then there's tooling and infrastructure. And I didn't know it at the time, but when I was building Gitcoin, I think that we were building one of the tooling and infrastructure pieces of the regenerative Web3 ecosystem. And so this whole ecosystem is growing and ebbing and flowing together in this really beautiful way. And so impact DAOs are actually happening now. And I think that that's a hugely positive sign. And then the last thing that I'll note about the Web3 ecosystem that I'm really excited about when it comes to regeneration is that the conveners are here. So projects like the ReFi Summit and Regen's Unite and the Impact DAO.xyz project and ReFi, and I think I already said ReFi DAO. The conveners are here. They are holding space for the projects that are actually focused on regenerative finance. And I think that, one of the things that I learned I read this book called Impact Networks by David Ehrlichman about a year ago. And one of the things that he said is that the conveners are some of the most underappreciated parts of any social movement, because it is the trust and rapport and the relationship that people build with each other that is able to let them build a stronger impact network and actually have more impact. So it's the relationships of all of the people in the network and the density and the strength of them that is going to be the predictor of the outcome of an impact network. And it's the conveners that are doing the hard and the dirty work of socially convening us to build Regen Web3. So that's like maybe a little bit of an overview of Regen Web3. I'd love to talk next about the work that I've been doing within the GreenPilled ecosystem in order to stimulate the Regen Web3 ecosystem. But before doing so, I just want to note that GreenPilled for me is just a channel for greater strengths and intelligence to come together. It's not about GreenPilled, the brand. It's about building a vessel that is a strong mimetic capsule for people to get GreenPilled, to build Regen Web3. So Regen Web3 is the destination and GreenPilled is just a channel. So GreenPilled V1 was just an initial exploration of the design space in 2022. Was 22 February 22. I launched the GreenPilled book, which is just a self-published book. I was lucky enough to get forwards by Vitalik Buterin and Glenn Weil and Balaji Srivasan. This is before he even launched the Network State book, and was able to pick up about 10,000 readers of people who also shared this vision of using crypto to regenerate the world. And again, not saying that it's happening yet, but a vision of how it could happen. On the heels of that, I launched the GreenPilled podcast, which has done about 120 episodes now and has thousands of listeners, featuring the projects that are actually making it happen. We released the Impact DAO book and poster, which allowed us to cartography the projects that were actually doing it. And it was these things that led us to the creation of GreenPilled V2. So the book and the podcast and the Telegram channels were all just an initial attractor, like a shelling point for meeting hundreds and then eventually thousands of regens that are now compose what I'm calling the GreenPilled.network. And we're trying to build a movement towards more regenerative Web3 by convening the people, by building local chapters that are actually practicing green pilling locally, and cross-pollinating skills and resources until we make it happen. So V1 was a book, V2 is a movement, is a network, and there's lots of fun stuff that I've got brewing in the GreenPilled network now. So there's a more earthy, high fidelity brand that we've been working on, more of a focus on showing, not telling. So like the GreenPilled V1 book was all about the prisoner's dilemma and bentoism and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all of the thought frameworks that you need in order to understand regeneration in a Web3 age. And V2 is just going to be very plainly on, hey, we're regenerating our local community with quadratic funding or retroactive public goods funding. More showing instead of telling. When people want to go down the rabbit hole and learn the theory, they can. It's all there. But now is time to focus on showing, not telling, accessibility of content, and localism. I'm really excited about these 24 chapters because I really believe that people that are in their local environment are going to have a lot of context and legitimacy and relationships about what that local ecosystem needs. And because they are participants in a global network in the Web3 ecosystem, and to some extent GreenPilled network, they're going to have context on the latest and greatest world-class skills that they can apply locally in order to regenerate their local community. And that's really exciting to me because I think Web2 did it completely wrong. They just kind of Zuckerberged in the same Facebook communities and the same Twitter social networks to every community equally across the world. What if we could cultivate more bottoms-up experiments with regeneration using this technology in the local chapters? Other goodies that we're working on is quadratic funding rounds that are funding the local chapters. We've got a Discord where everyone hangs out and is jamming in order to make it happen. It's the quadratic funding rounds that I would love to talk about next. So my first priority is figuring out how to get more funding to the GreenPilled chapters. So basically, we've got initial seed funding from Supermodular, which is the company I'm now CEO of. Post Gitcoin, I now run a company called Supermodular, and we've got initial seed funding from ourselves, from the main Gitcoin grant round, and we're running quadratic funding rounds in order to channel funding to the local chapters. And once each local chapter has funding, then they can start to use that funding in order to organize themselves, but especially for doing impactful stuff in their local community. And so the eventual maturation of this, I think, is an iterative cycle in which we're running quadratic funding or retroactive public goods funding or other funding mechanisms that are creating like an aqueduct, little eddies of streams of funding out to these local communities. And I'm really excited to get the signal back about what's working in these local communities. Another priority they have right now is supporting local chapters with local regen guides, just cross-pollinating best practices across different communities. Obviously, what works in community A won't always work in community B, but I do think that there's a high capacity if we create guides that are generalizable enough that some chapters will be able to cross-pollinate things like regenerative agriculture, or how to run a meetup, or how to do quadratic funding around together. So like having the network teach to each other, I think, is a really important thing to stimulate, because if we were a hub and spoke network where everyone would just had a connection to me and I was in the center, that's not the goal. Then we would only have O of N connections in the network, which is basically saying that we have a linear amount of connections in teaching relationships in the network. But if everyone connects with everyone else, we have O of N squared connections in the network, and it becomes a much deeper mesh network of value that's going back and forth between the chapter leads and people who are in these chapters. So it's all about stimulating that impact network, those relationships, and that cross-pollination between the local chapters. And then my third priority right now is focusing on accessibility of content. So basically, I could actually show you, if you go to the YouTube for GreenPilled, you could see we've published a lot of really beautiful stories about this video with Eric, and it happens to be about Web3 in Africa. And I think that what Eric is doing is really cool, but it's a 40-minute YouTube video. And so one of the things that we've been focused on with the last couple months is creating more inclusion of content by creating things like YouTube shorts. So basically punchy 45-second pieces of content about regenerative Web3 that'll pull people down the rabbit hole, as opposed to the longer content, which is great if you're already in the network, but maybe not so much if you're just getting started. So accessibility of content, bite-sized memes, bite-sized explainer videos are going to be, I think, really, really great for us as we're planning out this network and want to build it. And then my fourth priority is just following other leaders, the GreenPilled Ottawa chapter, the GreenPilled Denver chapter, Korea. There's a whole GreenPilled summit in India, which I thought was really, really cool, that someone just took the headless brand and was like, we're going to use it for our local meetup in India. So following other leaders and appearing at their events and supporting what they're doing has been my other priority from here. So GreenPilled.network, TLDR, is what I've been up to, and you can learn, participate, and explore in the Regen ecosystem by opening up your browser and going to GreenPilled.network. So that's the end of my talk. I did save some time for audience Q&A, but if this is a recording, I don't think that we're actually going to get to it. So I'll just say, Max and Yanizi, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much for hosting. I really appreciated it.
But we have really questions for you, if you don't mind.
Oh, cool. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, well, I would like to start with, like, we're big fans of your work, and thanks for this amazing presentation. It's hard to believe how much things you accomplished in this short time. I was curious, like, especially listening to your podcast, you spoke to many people. Do you see some kind of formula for societal transformations out of all of this experience you hear about?
Yeah. How do we regenerate society with one weird trick? is my shit post for this question. I don't think that there's like one silver bullet to actually doing it. But I have figured out that the first step is convening the earnest people who really want to make it happen and helping them build relationships with each other, because the network's much more anti-fragile when they're connected with each other. And then you start getting into standard startup stuff like, how to raise money, how to launch an MVP, how to get feedback from customers, like all the shit that I learned when I was a Web2 entrepreneur. You start to get into that stuff once you have the people convened, and it's about building skills to do entrepreneurship. And having the strength of character to focus on things that are positive sum games, as opposed to negative sum games, I think is another trick. But yeah, there's not just one thing that is something that you can do it all with. I think that it's a very brick by brick movement that we're building right now. And yeah, that's kind of where I've gotten to, but also able to want to learn from other leaders. Like, I think what Optimism is doing is way beyond what I or Gitcoin has ever been able to do. And what Giveth is doing and Protocol Guild is doing are all very cool. So I'm really excited to see what other leaders are able to come up with, but I haven't found like one way to do it.
It was also like interesting to hear that you moved out from Gitcoin to give space for the new leaders in general. Also, what is your vision for empowering new leaders, and like how do you, in the startup mode, when do you decide that, or how do you prepare for like enabling others?
Yeah. Well, specifically with a DAO, the focus was on decentralization, right? And just to trace it back, like when Gitcoin became a pillar of the Ethereum ecosystem, the one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that it was governed by the users that used it, right? So I've been like, when I was a Web2 entrepreneur, I always felt like I was stuck between my investors who wanted me to extract from my users, right? So instead of like, a linear transfer value from the users to the management to the investors, what if we created a closed loop where the people who govern the system are the users of the system? And so those were part of the reasons why Gitcoin needed to be a DAO. And me exiting Gitcoin was specifically because I wanted the users and the people who worked at Gitcoin to feel more ownership over the outcomes. And I think that there's a certain art and a science to like elevating leaders below you and elevating them into the decisions that you used to make. And it takes a certain amount of letting go of the ego of being the boss, of being in charge, knowing that you're basically cultivating people who are gonna replace you one day. They're actually leaders who will do the exact opposite of that, where they'll keep their like subordinates down so they don't have like challenges to their leadership position. And I actually think that's the exact opposite way that you want to think about it. But to actually answer your question, I think you've got to cultivate the right leaders, give them the context and learning and education, and when they're ready to step into the reins, you'll be able to feel it, and hopefully by the time you're stepping out, they're ready to step in.
There's a question in the chat. What would be the best resource to direct new interested people to go look for? That's from Bosco.
What sort of resources are you looking for, Bosco? Sorry, I missed that context.
Yeah,
I would say, sorry to cut you off. Maybe GreenPilled.network is a great place to go and check out all the chapters that we've been working on.
Yeah. So basically, there's not like a path to Regen. Do you consider that all paths can lead to this vision, or I don't know, because probably there are like too many things happening in the ecosystem, but are we really achieving this Regen vision? Or do you think it is like a framework needed to actually reach the goal?
So I think Web3 is a diverse ecosystem, and in some places we are absolutely utterly failing. The 3AC and the FTC stuff, I think, is like the exact opposite of regeneration. For for some ecosystems, like the fact that there is a pluralistic public goods funding ecosystem happening in the Ethereum ecosystem, I think that it's much more happening in that ecosystem and around the impact DAOs. Now, impact DAOs are like a freckle, on the animal that is Web3. It's such a small percentage of the capital that moves around in the space, so that ecosystem needs to grow. So, I mean, I think that the reason why the book is entitled "How Crypto Can Regenerate the World" is because it's not really happening yet, I think, by and large. But I do think that there's the seeds to make it happen, and maybe we should come up with a framework. Maybe that's something that we should all workshop together, is like, what's the framework for supporting each other? I think that that's a really good idea.
Also curious, do you do anything with the AI now?
I've been messing around with a couple ideas related to AI. We've been one of the most recent GreenPilled episodes we've launched was like talking about doing AI assisted DAO governance, and I think that that's a really interesting topic. But it's more of vaporware right now than anything, or like more of an idea than anything. And Griff and I have been talking a little bit about AI related coordination mechanisms that could be built into DAOs one day. But I'd be curious, to hear after the Trusted Seed conference what are the most promising examples of AIs and DAOs together. Because I think that I'd be learning more from you than anything at that point.
Yeah, there were some nice examples and researches in that direction, but of course, it's too early. We discussed something like token GPT, for example, for smart contract creation, for the like tagging of knowledge and voting preferences.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of opportunities there, especially with like how little people want to be involved in governance versus like how much demand for governance there is out there.
Yeah, we had actually 2 sessions related to governance.
Oh yeah, okay.
But yeah, we'll be,
also,
yeah. Sorry, Max, go.
I was just curious about the status of the party. I think somewhere in this GreenPilled idea, there was the idea to create a party, like political or something. Do you have any updates on that?
Oh, I don't know anything about that. That might have been an idea that someone else was pitching under the Headless brand. But I'd be curious to see. I'd be curious to see if it actually happens and becomes a political party, what comes of it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. Curious. I definitely appreciate the kind of focus that you're doing now more on the people than connecting computers. Now you're working on connecting people. You obviously, like, for using crypto, you still need a transaction ledger of record. Do you view staying within the Ethereum ecosystem and letting kind of people come gravitate towards that, or do you view this as being more chain agnostic almost, and being able to kind of populate the different chains that exist in Web3, like the varied ecosystems?
Yeah, I think that it's plausible that we'll have a pluralistic blockchain ecosystem one day, and I think that like all these things are just like their means to an end, which is building a better financial system for humanity. So I'm not a chain maxi at all. I just happen to do most stuff in the Ethereum ecosystem because it's got the biggest network effects and the EVM is super powerful. So that's where I've been starting. But I also think that things like Cosmos are legitimate, and we'll be curious to see what comes out of those ecosystems.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciated the time, and curious how the recording does within your network, and I will check out the streams of the rest of the talks.
Yeah,
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Cool. Peace
Thank
and love,
you
y'all.
for joining.
Bye.
Bye.